Hello, everyone. This is Kate Alder from Irvine Valley College. I see that several of you are sending a question that you're not getting any sound. That's because there's not any sound right now, although right now there seems to be a lot of sound behind me. So sorry for the background noise. And if you just hold on for another minute or two, I'll go ahead and get started with explaining some of the technical tips for today's webinar. Thank you for your time. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kate Alder with Irvine Valley College, and I'm here today to lend technical support to today's Brown Bag webinar with Dr. Catherine Brooks. So I hope you are all doing okay and running, sure, rapidly as we're getting back into the spring semester for everyone. Some of you I know won't be starting till next week. Some of us have already started. So again, this is Kate Alder with Irvine Valley College. I'm just going to take you through some technical tips for being successful here. The voice over IP audio, you can listen either via computer speakers or a headset. If you're listening individually, a headset might be ideal, but you will not need the microphone. So if you're using a headset, please make sure your microphone is muted. If you're using a telephone to dial in, I do apologize that telephone dial-in is not a toll-free number, so I hope you'll just be listening using your computer speakers if you're in a group or a headset if you're alone. On the telephone, use *6 on the keypad to mute or unmute. To mute the microphone, you'll use the green button on your control panel. And in a moment, I'll show you how you can see what the control panel looks like. So on this slide here, this is a diagram or an example of what your control panel looks like. So in this area down here, you can see, I can see right here this red slash going through the green microphone. The red slash indicates that this microphone is muted. The other thing I would like you to note is this questions area. So if you have a question, technical or otherwise, please type your question in here, and throughout the webinar, I will be monitoring the question panel and answering the questions. We'd like to hold any of the Q&A type questions till the end of the presentation. So I will be monitoring those, and when Dr. Brooks is done with her presentation, I'll go ahead and read some of those questions to her, and she'll be answering those for us at the end. I just got a message saying that my screen wasn't showing, so I apologize for that. Hopefully you're seeing this slide now. This is the questions area where you will be typing in the questions, and this is the microphone button that when you click on it, it will mute your microphone. If you click on it again, it will unmute your microphone. So again, if you have any questions, please just feel free to send them to me, and if they're technical, I'll try to answer them right away, and otherwise I'll hold them till the Q&A session at the end. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rita Jones, whom you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. And so, Rita, if you can go ahead and take the presentation now and get us going. Thank you, folks.
Okay, I believe I'm starting now. Okay, welcome to the Visual Thinking and Career Development webinar with Kate Brooks. My name is Rita Jones, and I will be your facilitator today. I've asked Susan Coleman, our grant director, to take just a moment to tell you why we are offering this series and how we're able to make it available to you at no cost. Susan. Susan?
apologize, folks. It looks like we've lost Susan's audio for just a moment. If you can hold on for us, I'm going to see if I can reach Susan for us.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, career professionals. We're glad to have you with us this morning. As you can tell, you're our first experiment, but we're really excited to use this type of staff development to reach out to more people across the state. Our goal is to present quality staff development with tools and techniques to make your life and job easier and to make things better for students. This is a continuation of some staff development training that we started last year face-to-face, and we wanted to reach out to more people, so we decided to try the webinar format. It is funded by SB 70, Career Development and Work-Based Learning Linkages to Professional Associations, hosted by Irvine Valley College. So again, welcome. We're glad to have you with us, and we'll be anxious to have your feedback. I'll turn it back now to Kate Brooks.
Or to Rita.
Yes.
That's okay. Okay, just to let you know, the agenda for the webinar today is about 40 minutes with Kate Brooks, and we will leave time for questions or comments at the end. Remember, you may ask questions at any time by using the question box, and then we'll get to them as soon as we can. Make sure you stay till the end. We're hoping that some of your colleagues that have been trained by Kate last fall will be on the call and share with you their experiences with the material. But as a special treat, you will also receive a PDF of the worksheets and instructions for the visual techniques. The worksheets will be ready to print and use with your students. Now, if you've not had the pleasure of a training with Kate before, we have a real treat in store for you. And I know it's easy to multitask during these events. I'd like to ask you to sit back, enjoy yourself, and fully listen to what is going on. I think you'll see a difference in the quality of your experience. We've asked Kate to join us in this grant project because she does such what I consider an incredible job, not only with all aspects of the career development process, but tying in the whole work-based learning piece, which, as you know and I know, our students need to be able to really transition to successful careers. Kate is a career coach and a counselor who has been in the field of career advising for over 20 years. She holds a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation and a doctorate in educational psychology from West Virginia University. She's the author of You Majored in What?, a career book for college students which uses a variety of visual thinking techniques to help students make important career decisions. In this series, and there will be 4 of these webinars, Dr. Brooks will teach you the value of visual techniques and help you develop your own techniques for working with the many types of students you encounter. So we're all really looking forward to this series, so I'm going to turn it over to Kate. Kate?
I'm here. Thanks, Rita. And at this point, hold on 1 minute. I just have to do some techie things here and show my screen. And I hope at this point you all can see my screen. So thank you all for coming today and taking time out of what is your lunch hour. It's middle of the afternoon for me here in Texas, but I know that you all are giving up your lunches, so I hope you brought something good to eat to your meetings. So today what we're going to do is talk about this using visual thinking as a way to enhance whatever it is you do. And I know most of you are probably in career services, but maybe not all. Some of you might be more academic advisors and have other roles. And I hope that you'll find that you'll be able to adapt what I say today to whatever it is that you do. And basically, there's 3 goals for the series today, and actually for the next 4. But the first is to introduce visual techniques for you to use with your career advising. Again, as I said, these can be applied to other things. But also, please consider this just a starting point. I would really like for you to take these ideas and combine them with what you do and find new ways to use them. And my hope is over the next few weeks you will share that information, bring it back to us so we can all learn from it, which would be wonderful. And finally, another advantage or another aspect of this webinar series is that visual thinking is very action-oriented. You know, so many of us spend a lot of time with students and we talk a lot to them and we listen to them, but there's not much that's left after they leave the room. And with these activities, there will actually be a tangible thing. Students really benefit from them. So I'd like to kind of move in right away to what are the advantages of using visual thinking. And I think this quote I have at the top really explains it. It's easier to organize your thoughts if you can see them. We've all had that experience, unfortunately, usually at 1 in the morning, when the television's off and everything's turned off and the room is quiet, and now our brains just decide to pick up. And they want to remind us of everything, either what went on during the day, or they want to tell us, you know, don't forget to pick up the something tomorrow at the grocery store, or don't forget to drop the car off for inspection, or don't forget to call that student, you know, all those thoughts. And so all of you, I suspect, already practice visual thinking because you make lists. You know, just writing it down on a list is a way of getting it out of your brain, and that's exactly the advantage of visual thinking. So it helps us organize, and we can clarify what we're thinking, and at the same time it can cut back the complexity. You know how sometimes things in your head seem so enormous, but then when you get them down on a piece of paper, not so bad. Also, certain kinds of visual thinking techniques can help you see relationships more easily than you would otherwise. So when your students are struggling for the relationship between what they're studying and what they might do later, or between what they're doing on an internship and what their career might be, this type of thinking will help them see those relationships. Certain problem solving is easier to do in a visual thinking style, and so we'll talk about that. And also, understanding and retention of information usually improves when you use some kind of visual thinking. Next week we're going to talk about maps, and mind maps are a great way to do everything from planning careers to studying for tests. So it's a great way to remember what you've done. And what I love about visual thinking is it is unimpeded by poor budgets. So even if you're down to your last $100 in your budget, if you can afford paper and a pencil, you're ready to go. So all of the things that we're doing today that I'm going to show you can be done with a paper and pencil. There are a little fancier ways to do it if you want to use Word. Word has smart art and things that you can use, and that's pretty cheap too, because I assume your college has already provided that for you. And then, as I said, to me, one of the best parts is you get a takeaway. Instead of just talking to a student about something, they actually walk out the door. So it's with a product. So it's just a great way to work with students. So today, what I wanted to do is just a basic introduction, and then we're going to move into shapes. But the thing I wanted to cover here is the tools of the trade. These are the things you need. As I said, really, paper and pencil is all you have to have. But I personally like legal size paper. I keep a pad of legal size paper, you know, just a ream of paper like you would buy for a Xerox machine. I keep that in my office, and I keep a cup that's filled with sharpened pencils and pens. And that is all I need for the whole semester. Now, when I'm doing group presentations, because everything I'm talking about can be done to a group, it can be done at meetings, it can be done in lots of different places. Sometimes markers are fun because students like to use color, and if they have time and you're doing a group activity, having different kinds of markers is a great thing. And then another helpful thing to have around is Post-it notes, and later on in this series we'll talk about some things you can do with Post-it notes to just add a little bit of creativity to the whole project. But as I mentioned, smart art in Word is also a very good way to go. So if you don't want to do the paper and pencil, you're not particularly good at drawing squares and circles. I hope you are, but you know, if you're challenged that area, just go to smart art in Word. So again, I encourage you as we go along here to be thinking about ways that you can apply this. So when we think about the first shape we're going to do, and this is the shape we're going to do today, it's boxes. So it's rectangles and squares, and I'm assuming everybody in the room can draw that. And really, squares and rectangles are great because they provide a frame for whatever it is we're talking about. It's a very stable kind of drawing. It really lends itself to any kind of activity that needs order or rational thinking or logical thinking. Rectangles and squares are just perfect for that sort of thing. And they also can be used to highlight or set apart any kind of information. Anything that you're doing that can be broken down into steps or into compartments, immediately start thinking about how could I create a drawing with a rectangle or a square. They just very much lend themselves to that sort of thing. So, for instance, these are taken out of, again, oh, I had no idea that one little thing was going to start moving. That's unusual. Anyway, these were taken out of just the little word things for, I can't think what it's called right now, for Word, just the little pictures that you can get that are right on with the computer program. And as you can see from that first one that is very strangely moving, it's a square or a rectangle that has a jigsaw puzzle format. And so that's, a perfect way to start visualizing if students have to put together pieces in a puzzle. That's just an ideal way to do it. And then on the right, I've got another example of some basic squares, building blocks. That's another example of, is there a way I could, if I've got something that has to build, where they have to do one thing first, maybe the first semester they're in school, and then second semester, here's what they need to do, and the third semester and fourth semester. That would be the type of exercise that you could create some kind of building block design for that would help to explain it. Again, the idea is it's just a visual way of organizing the information, and it helps with memory. The lower left is actually supposed to be a little quilt, and so that little quilt design, and as you can see, there's 4 little, you don't really need the hearts, but there's 4 little squares across, and there's 5 squares up and down, giving us 20 squares. You could draw a little square diagram like that. Don't bother with the hearts. And you could have students in each one of those little squares write a one-word description of themselves. So that they might fill that up with, I'm smart, I'm creative, I'm a good basketball player, whatever. They could fill up each one, and that would encourage them to start thinking about their strengths. And then on the right, there's another classic building block design, the ladder, sort of that progression and moving up. So it's just a really nice visual image, and it's a nice way to just think about different ways to categorize information. I'm going to get it off that slide because that was just a really crazy jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so the first rectangle I want to show you is an exercise that I did not create. It was created by Dr. Susan Jeffers, who wrote an excellent book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I highly recommend that book. It's a great book for anybody that's trying to overcome either just anxiety or just, needs to branch out and take a chance and do some things. She's a very good writer, and the book is excellent. But in the midst of this book, one of the things she talks about is that so many of us have lives that are not very balanced. And she says that most of us have 2 boxes in our lives, and one box is work, and the other box is maybe family or your significant other. And she said most of us go back and forth between those 2 boxes, and then we wonder why we get stressed. And also, if you think about it, when one of those boxes falls out, if unfortunately, let's say something happens to your job, that is essentially half your life that just dropped out there. So what Dr. Jeffers recommends is that instead you draw a rectangle, and I hope those of you who are sitting there with paper and pencil just go ahead and do this while I'm talking because it'll make it better. Draw the rectangle, and then you draw 2 lines down and 2 lines across so that you got your 9 boxes. And don't worry that if it's not perfect looking like that one in the slide, you do it anyway. And then what she suggests you do is put in each one of those boxes a word that signifies an important part of your life. So for instance, one box might be a relationship that you're in, one box might be school, one box might be work, another one might be friends. You could put hobbies, maybe other relationships. You could have religion or spirituality. You could have contribution if you, or volunteering if that's something you want to have in your life. If you want, you can specify very important hobbies, like maybe you go fishing a lot or you play an instrument or something like that. So the idea is you sort of make your life a little fuller. You have these 9 boxes now instead of just 2. And then the next question that she asked you is the question that's on that slide. And she says, if I counted, what would I do each week to move forward in these areas? Now, one danger is now that you have these 9 boxes, the temptation is to fill in all kinds of things you could do. And you don't want to do that because you're going to overwhelm yourself and then you're going to throw that piece of paper away. What you want to do instead is just pick 1 or 2 things in each of these box areas that you might want to do next week. So for instance, let's say you've been so busy you really haven't been in touch with some of your good friends, and maybe you owe one of your friends an email. Okay, so your box that says friends, the goal in there for next week might be send an email to this friend. And as you can see, that probably isn't going to take all that long. We're talking maybe 10 minutes. But if you think about the cumulative effect of if you do this every week and you look at this 9 boxes of life, maybe like on Sunday evening when you're getting ready to start your week, and you look at it and you say, what do I want to do this week to move forward with my friends? What do I want to do this week to do something fun in my relationship? What might I do this week at work that's really important to get done? And again, you go back to that idea of you're important, and if you really count it, how could you move forward? So again, the box, really this visual effect just becomes an organizing tool. It's just a way of, if you tried to every Sunday night think about 9 important areas in your life and what are the things you could do in each of those areas, you know, your brain would just sort of blow up at that point. But if you have it written out like this, and you just look at your 9 boxes each week and you say, okay, here's what I want to do this week in this box, and then give it a try. And, you know, there's no one to say anything if you don't get it done, and you just try again the following week. So that's a really nice organizing tool. And I can tell you I use it all the time, particularly with older students. Now, as I say that, the truth is I have used it with first-year students, and because I think, oh, they're 17 or 18, really, how busy can they be? And yet it's amazing, as you all know. They're just as busy, and they're just as disorganized as some of us. So I have found that it's an exercise that I'm always surprised how well it works with almost everybody. I particularly find it useful with the people who are really balancing a lot, like for instance a single mom who's returning to school. You know, talk about she probably already is very well aware that she has at least 9 boxes. She probably feels like she has about 18. But the idea is, again, it helps people who are having time management issues, who are having goal setting issues, anything like that. It usually works very nicely for. So this is one of those exercises that I recommend you try maybe yourself if you want to, but then also be thinking this week of who might this work on? Where am I doing a workshop, or am I going to be around some people who might benefit from this knowledge? Maybe even take it home, try it with family members who are probably pretty busy too. So that's one example of a rectangle. Now here's another one. This is just kind of your basic rectangle. Now I know it looks a little fancy, but again, this is smart art that's done on Microsoft Word. So I didn't do anything other than download it from Smart Art and add some words to it. So you can do this. You can have these prepared ahead of time. But if many of you work with students, for instance, who are having to make choices, maybe they're choosing between different majors, they're choosing between different job opportunities, they're choosing between different careers. I like this type of a drawing because, you know, again, you could just have a conversation with them. You could just talk to them and say, well, what are you considering? And they can tell you what they're considering, and you can chat about it. But another way to do this is to actually write it down in a structure like this. So in this example, I have a student who's choosing between 3 possible majors. One is a spa management major. I actually think I found that at one of your colleges. I thought that was very cool. Spa management major, nutrition and fitness education, or respiratory care. And they, you know, they come into your office and they say, I'm not sure which. This is a nice way to get it out of their brain and onto a piece of paper where you can very quickly, and I just picked sort of 3 areas you might want to investigate. There's nothing sacred about those categories that I picked there next to the dots. You could put anything you want there. But for instance, maybe the length of time to complete the degree could be a factor for this person. Or maybe they do or don't know what the typical careers are in that field, and in fact, what's the opening career? What's the first job I might get after getting that degree? And then they might want to compare salaries. Maybe that's a factor for them. And as I said, the questions can all change. What's more important is that, as you can see, the structure just allows you to have a very clean flow. And you could work on this with the student and help them fill in gaps where they don't know something. It's also great for pros and cons, you know, comparing one to the other. And again, the student, gets to leave with this chart, and it really helps put them in perspective. Sometimes what I'll do, by the way, is when I make these charts with students, I almost always draw them by hand. I never do anything this fancy. But what I will do is make a copy of it before they leave, and then I keep it in their file so that if they lose it, or if I just want to refer back to it, and if I see them again, then it's a great reminder of what we did before. So that's another example of a rectangle, or how you might use it. Any kind of situation where you're comparing and contrasting, rectangles and squares can be really helpful. As you can see, this is all about logical thinking, rational thinking, decision making. It's just the squares and the rectangles really lend themselves to that. Now, this is another technique, the SWOT analysis, that many of you are already familiar with. If you've taken training with me, I've probably beaten this to death already, but a reminder never hurts. Anyone who's gone through strategic planning of any sort has probably encountered a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And as you can see on the left on that slide, that's a fancy one that was done with the word art. On the right is your basic 4 squares. So again, like I said, I do mine just on a piece of paper and I just write out the words. But if you like to make yours a little fancier, do it with the word art, print it out in advance. I really use a SWOT primarily in 3 areas. One is to help students craft a cover letter. Another use is to help with career choices that they're making. And the third is for interview preparation. And so I want to just talk a little bit about it for the cover letter design, for instance, because that's the one that people sort of go, really? But take a look at these blocks. And when you're looking at a job description, a student comes in and says, I have this job that I'd like to apply to, and I need to write my letter. Well, you can sit there with the job description, and you can start to say, okay, now, what are your strengths when it comes to this particular job? And the student and you, or you can, in that block, start to write down the very specific strengths that they want to be sure to tell the employer in that cover letter. And then what I do is I ask them to give me an example. So let's say the job description said they need to be a team player. And the student puts under their strengths section, I'm a team player. That's something I do well. First thing I would do is while we're putting this SWOT together, I'd stop and I'd say, give me an example. Tell me a time when you were a team player, and get them to tell me. And if it's a good story, if it's a good example, if it's not a great example, I might try to work with them on it a little bit. But if it's a good example, start just jotting it down, just the basic notes, so that what the student can ultimately do is turn that into a sentence. They can write in their cover letter, I'm a great team player as exemplified last semester when I did whatever. So they're building this letter. They're actually creating almost an outline for this letter as they're working on this SWOT. And then the weaknesses. Some people are not crazy about using that word, but unfortunately, they like challenges instead, and certainly feel free to use that, but I guess you'll have to call it a SWOT analysis then. But the weaknesses side is, again, internal to the person. So what are their specific weaknesses or challenges? And it might be that the job requires a specific major, or they recommend a certain major and the student doesn't have that. Or it could be that there's maybe a computer skill that's needed. Maybe they need knowledge of Excel and the student's never used Excel. But the point is to help the student look at that job posting announcement and then look at where their weaknesses might be, and is there a way to overcome them? Can they explain in their letter? For instance, let's say they expect them to be a business major, but the student majored in something else. They don't have that. Okay, they need to stop and talk with you for a few minutes about how their major might apply to a business setting, or other skills they might have that would compensate for not having that business major. So that would be, again, a chance to create a sentence in the letter. Now, you would never lead with your strength or with your weaknesses and say, although I'm not a business major, but you might put, I developed business skills through, and then talk about that, and maybe not bring up the specific major. But the idea is that you want the student to go into this situation, into this writing this cover letter, or even into the interview. You want them to know ahead of time where the roadblocks might be so that they're all ready and have an answer for it. Then the right side of the SWOT analysis is opportunities at the top and threats at the bottom. Opportunities is just like it sounds. It's what are the opportunities? So one of the things you might ask the student is, so now if you went to work for this company, what opportunities do they have? Now, if the student doesn't know, there's a clue that they need to go to the website and they need to do a little more research. For instance, they might want to find out about certain divisions in the company, or maybe the company in the description describes certain opportunities that they'll have. Well, this is something they want to link to. They want to say, I'm particularly excited about the opportunity that your company has for XYZ, and then maybe explain how they link to that opportunity. You know, why would they be the person to take advantage of that? So again, it helps flesh out. As you can see, like I said, these squares are very logical, rational things. So we are really honing in and finding out where the strengths and where the challenges are through this exercise. And then the last is the threats, and threats are outside of us. Threats are things we can't really control, the economy, for instance. So the idea with the outside threats is that we want to be able to, if we can't overcome them, at least be aware of them, and is there any way to address it or compensate in some other way? So again, a threat might be something like I said, the economy, but it could also be something like if they asked for a business major, there will be individuals with business majors who will be applying. So that's a threat. Anybody else who's applying is an outside threat, and you can't control who else is applying. You can't control if 900 other people apply. All you can do is try to be the best that you can be as an applicant. And so by sitting down and doing this with a student, they really see a clear picture of how they fit. And then if you've been helping them all along with sort of examples and things, they almost have the cover letter written by the time they leave your office, because you can help them then sit down and maybe just practice crafting 1 or 2 sentences. You know, how are you going to explain this strength? How do we want to mention that, you know, you don't have this area? How can we find a positive way to put a spin on that? And so it's just a very nice writing kind of analysis tool. And what I'd like to show you is a SWAT example here when it gets used in a career choice situation, because I have had people say, I don't really get how I would use that. So I hope you all can read that slide. I realize the print's a little small. This is an example of a student who says they want to go into fashion design and merchandising. And so the students come into your office and they don't really know how to get there. All they know is, I want a career in fashion design and merchandising. And so you might say, well, you know what, let's analyze this again, because squares are great for analysis. So you'd start by saying, you know, what are your strengths, and, you know, how do you see yourself fitting into this field? And maybe the student tells you things, well, I really like fashions, and I read every single fashion magazine, and I watch Project Runway and all the TV shows that deal with fashion, and I know what the latest, I know all the designer names and so on, and I know all the trends. So clearly you have somebody with a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm, and that's a strength that you can sort of say back to them, you know, just reinforcing this idea that, wow, you really have a lot of interest. I can tell you've taken a lot of time with this. And then the next thing is to say, well, what challenges do you think you might have? And this might be a little bit of a conversation where you would find out, you know, what's your major and what experience have you had? And in the case I have here, we've got a student who doesn't have maybe a lot of experience in retail. They haven't had an opportunity to do that. Maybe they don't have a car at the moment to get them to a job. And maybe they haven't done their resume yet. So they, you know, what we're starting to find now, and the good thing about almost all those things is they're pretty much correctable. But now we're getting a broader picture of some of the challenges for this person to go into this field. And then we look at opportunities. And maybe the student could be encouraged to think of some local department stores. And again, if they don't have a car, we might want to get a bus line map if there is public transportation available, or we might want to find out if there's any sort of special transportation to the mall that's available. But in any case, you know, what are the local department stores? Are there opportunities in the geographic area? Are there maybe some little boutique stores? Because sometimes if you get a job at a little store, you know, if you go to Macy's, you're probably going to be put in a very specific role, and you won't be able to branch out of that very well. But if you go work for a little gift shop or something where it's a mom and pop kind of thing, and you're left there alone all day, you have lots of opportunities to learn management skills and all kinds of things. And students may not realize that. They might think, well, I only can work at a place like Macy's or Nordstrom's or whatever. So helping the student see the opportunities, getting them to suggest them, and then also then looking at what are the threats. Well, the economy, again, because that has really caused a downturn in the number of department stores and retail stores that are out there. There's definitely been a lot of stores closing. There's certainly going to be more competition for those kinds of positions, particularly the entry level, because retail tends to be very open-minded about who they hire. So as a result, lots of different majors can apply to that. Their geographic location might be a threat. They might be living in a small town or in a community that just doesn't really have a lot of retail options. And then also the positions that they are most interested in might require a bachelor's degree, and they're not quite there yet. So now what you have is an opportunity for a really good conversation about how do they see themselves breaking into retail. You know, some of you who were at my training on appreciative inquiry last, I guess that was last fall, we had that wonderful phrase, pull back the curtain. That notion of so many of us have this very narrow view of what's out there and what kinds of jobs we can do. And so I might, if I'm a retail student, you know, I might have one very specific company I want to work for, and I'm really not thinking about anything else. Or I wouldn't even consider working for, let's say, Target, because I want to work for a really, you know, I'm into high-level fashion. Well, there's a lot of fashion designers, quite frankly, who design for Target. And so letting the students, you know, getting them to understand that Target might be a perfect starting opportunity to learn to work a cash register, to learn customer service, all those things that they can build up. So those, you know, again, this conversation then also can turn into, okay, now we have a big picture. What would you like to do next? Now that we see all these different factors, and I assume you're going to keep watching your TV shows and you're going to keep reading your fashion magazines, so that's great. So let's take a glance at those weaknesses and some of those things. What would you like to work on first? And you know, if they honestly don't know, that's a good place for you to help shape that conversation. You know, you could say, well, for starters, we could do a resume, and that way if any jobs open up, you're ready to go. Or we could say, or you might want to start with, well, what's one thing you could do tomorrow to be closer to a retail career? And you might want to hone in on the opportunities and the fact that the student didn't seem to be aware of all the different department stores in the area or all the different retail stores. And maybe say, what if you went to the web tonight and Googled stores or something on Google Maps and see what's out there, and compile a list of the top 10 stores you'd most like to work for, or the top 10 stores in the area that might have the most opportunities. But the idea is that by doing this, when the student walks out from your office, they now have a pretty good picture of, it's almost like a snapshot of where they are. And again, for those of you who have taken my training, you know that the coaching metaphor I like to use is the GPS tracking system, which basically says, where are you now, where do you want to be, and what are the steps we need to do to get you there. So this is a great illustration of where they are now. And so if they, by the time they leave your office, they still want the career in fashion design and merchandising, hopefully they do. Now what you can do is help them shape those directions and how to get there. And they have a very clear picture. They know what they're going to need to do. They may know that, okay, this probably means in the future I'm going to need to go on and get that bachelor's degree. I can't stop at the AA degree. Or they may realize that, you know, I have got to get experience. And they might be more willing and open-minded to take experience that they might not have considered before. So that's the, you know, that's really the advantage of the this type of design. And I also, you know, I want to mention that the grant that we have been using to fund this training and projects has been a wonderful grant, and the emphasis through the grant has been on professional organizations. And one of the things I like about the SWAT design is it fits beautifully with professional organizations because, you know, particularly when it comes to the opportunities in specific careers or way to overcome weaknesses. For instance, one weakness might be this individual doesn't know anybody in the retail field. Well, you know, going and checking out what are the professional organizations for fashion, for the fashion industry, for the buyers, for department managers, for folks who work in retail. You know, what organizations do those folks belong to? And is there a meeting in the area of a retail managers group? You know, something like that. This is a perfect opportunity to introduce students to the value of a professional organization. And I just have found SWATs are are great for that because that opportunity section just lends itself perfectly to that. And so does, quite frankly, the weakness section, because almost always a weakness that I get from my students is I don't know anyone in the field. So professional organizations are a great way to do that. Now, what I promised Rita and Susan is that I would finish this as close to 2:40, or I'm sorry, it's 12:40 your time, and by golly, 2:38 for me, 12:38 for you. That's pretty close. So what I'd like to do is we're going to give this back to the other Kate, who is the expert on the technical aspects of this, and she's going to help us with the Q&A. And here's another thing. I'm really hoping that you all are either going to share some examples where you've already used these, and hopefully they've worked. We can always hear disaster stories too, but hopefully some great examples of where they've worked. And as you can see, what I have on that last slide is what I'd really love for you to do is we're going to meet here next Friday, so I'd love you to look at your schedule to see if there's a place where you think you could try one of these. And I leave it to you to be open-minded and creative about where that might happen. Because you can do these as group exercises, you can do them one-on-one, and so on. So Kate Alder, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Kate. This is Kate Alder. No one has submitted any questions in the questions panel. Candy,
we have a quiet group.
Yes, we do. Although attentive, I will say I've been watching, and we've got a pretty good attention rate here. So I do have a hand raised from Candy Dickinson. Candy, I'm going to unmute your microphone. If you're there, did you have a question to ask or a comment to make? Candy Dickinson? Okay, looks like Candy's not there. Does anybody else, if you have a question or want to make a comment, if you have a microphone, if you raise your hand, I can unmute you. Okay, we've got Judy Gould on the line right now. Judy, are you there? Okay, I have a question that was submitted through the panel that from Basmajian, from Lydia. It says, thank you very much. Very helpful resources that I will try to use with my students.
Great.
I have a couple
I can't.
Whoops. I was trying to unmute another person's microphone, and so let me see if, I'm sorry, Kate Brooks, what were you going to say?
That's quite all right. I was just going to say, I can't emphasize enough to just play around and experiment. These aren't magic. They really are. I mean, they're fun. They're a lot of fun, and I find students just really enjoy them, and they just seem to they love the logic of it. And particularly when you have students who are undecided and overwhelmed and don't know what they want to do or don't know what they want to major in, you know, this just gives such order and structure to it, and so, you know, I don't know, it just helps, to me, it helps organize the conversation.
Very much so. Lydia has now submitted another question, Kate Brooks. Lydia is asking, how do you use these exercises with students who are hesitant to actually do this?
Oh, you know, to tell you the truth, I'll do it for them. I will say, you know, again, it depends what the topic is, but let's say a student comes in and you know, they're, again, deciding on what they might, like, okay, let's say they've brought in a job announcement and they're trying to decide whether to apply for it or not. If I think it's appropriate, what I'll say is, you know, I've got a system here that I like to use when I'm trying to figure stuff out. Do you mind if I just take a piece of paper here and draw on it? And no student has ever said, no, please don't draw on the paper. So I just start drawing, and I say, let's look at it this way, and I'll just put the strengths at the top, and then I'll start I'll do it like a conversation, as opposed to, I have this pre-formatted design, and we're going to fit it into that. Sometimes that's a way to do it. They're usually sometimes a little caught off guard, but for the most part, I can't think of a student I've ever had who said that was worthless. In fact, when I teach classes, the SWAT design is one of those things I teach, and almost every semester, at the end of the semester, that's one of the things the students remember. They say, I've used that in, you know, 5 different settings, and it's been really helpful.
Hello?
Yeah, Kate, are you there?
Oh, yes, it's Rita. I think we've lost Rita.
Okay,
so I'm going to come on.
Sorry.
I apologize. As you can tell, this is our, hello?
Wait, I think
Hello.
we're back.
Kate Alder is here. I have a question from Holly Eubank. How long do you spend working with a student doing SWAT?
That's another beauty of the SWAT. I have done them in 10-minute walk-ins. Now, granted, I'm used to doing them, so I can do them pretty quickly. I think them through, and so if this is your first time to do one, give yourself probably a half-hour appointment. But otherwise, literally, I've done them in 5 or 10 minutes. And, and again, it depends on the student. Sometimes it's a little bit of pulling teeth, just try to get things out of them. But if they've got any kind of knowledge of the field or knowledge of themselves, it can move very rapidly. So it's a great technique for even walk-ins.
Great. Judy Gould she's was trying to connect with her microphone. I tried to unmute her, but it wasn't working. But she says she uses SWAT in fantasy career exercise where they pick their dream career, imagine themselves in it, reporting back on their accomplishments. Then we do a SWAT on how they might get there.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea too. So, and then Eileen O'Brien I found that having heard this info at one of your previous trainings really makes it more meaningful the second time having heard it. I'm going to use one of these next week. Thanks again, Eileen. And then Justina wants to know, will she be able to, so while everyone's on the line, I am recording the webinar today. It'll take a little while for us to get it up, but hopefully we'll have it posted up to the Ning sometime next week. Candy Dixon wants to know, Kate Brooks, can you give us an example how to use the 9 boxes when talking about careers and choosing a major or career?
To be honest, I haven't used it in that capacity. And if someone comes up with that, that would be great. 9 boxes is really more designed for the balanced life. It's a better exercise just because there's 9 choices. Unless somebody has 9 majors they're thinking about, I think that would get overwhelming. But the 9 boxes is really meant more for life balance and I guess if you had something that had 9 categories, you could use it for that. But that's the only way I've ever used it, is just the way Susan Jeffers designed it for balance, life balance.
Great, thanks. I have Linda Langle says, I really like these ideas. I've used a few of them personally, and you've given me good ideas about how to put into pictures some of the conversations I have with students. It will be really useful for students. I'm going to use it when showing students how to analyze each particular job ad they pursue. Thanks. Anthony. Yeah, Anthony says, best way to handle this, here's his situation. You are assisting an older student halfway through my enthusiastic presentation of boxes and triangles. They aren't buying it, and you are losing your credibility. I find that many older customers aren't into the artsy/visual. Any suggestions, Kate?
Well, I think you always go with your client. They're right. Okay, the client is always right. And so I think what you do is if you try it and you're starting to do that and it's not working for that client, I'd stop doing it. And I would, there's that old phrase that to the man with a hammer, everything is a nail. I think you need to be careful that you don't just walk around with your hammer, your visual thinking tools, and you demand that everybody use them. I would never do that. I think, I like them. They work for me. They work for a majority of my students. But when you see it's not working, just admit it. Say, you know what, this doesn't seem to be helping very much, does it? And they'll probably agree with you. And then I'd say, well, then let's just talk. And it may be, and also you can start to find out maybe they feel you're, sometimes visual things you can't make as good eye contact with the client because you're looking down at the paper. They may feel that maybe you're not listening as well because you're working with the paper. Again, I haven't had that, but I could see where a client might say that. So yeah. Also, the other thing is I often ask them if they have a better way to represent it. Well, what would make this better? How could we do it? I've worked with engineers, for example, and next week I think we're doing mapping, and that's something that a lot of people resist, or a fair amount of people resist. And what I found is the engineers insist on making lists. They're like, I don't like this map. I'm going to make a list. Okay. And so, I just have them do the list first, and then I turn the list into a map. But we'll talk about that next time. And that's the other thing. Next time each week we're going to do a different shape, and different shapes are for different types of problems and different kinds of situations.
So we just have one more question, then we're going to turn it back over to Rita. But one more question here, Kate, from Melody. Do you have suggestions on how to counteract a student's feeling overwhelmed by the weaknesses and challenges they feel they will face in trying to meet their educational and career goals, in particular when they discover that they will need to take higher-level math classes for the major for their career choice?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think, you know, it's that classic thing of when you say yes to one thing, you have to say no to something else. And so if they are, you know, one thing to assess is what is their motivation to get past that. You know, admit that it's a hurdle. Admit that it's a part of the curriculum they'd rather not take. I suspect most people going to med school would rather not have had to take organic chemistry. But it's one of those stepping stones that it's a dividing line. It's you either do it or you can't move further. And so which is more important? And sometimes I have them rank their enthusiasm for getting the final goal, whatever that is, versus their enthusiasm for the steps along the way, and maybe set up a reward system for accomplishing things. They have them maybe sign up for a tutor for a class that they already know is going to be a challenge. What if you went to the tutoring center and got help and just set that up right from the get-go, knowing that this course is going to be a challenge. I think it's all about motivation, and are they motivated to do it? And, you know, if they make the decision no, that's okay. And then let's look at alternate careers then. Let's look at careers. Why did you want to be in that career? What were you hoping to get from it? And let's find some other careers that will get you a similar thing without having to take that math course.
Okay, Kate, we do kind of need to wrap it up. So I have Melanie just said thanks for your answer. Don Minio posted a comment that he's had some great experience with past leaders of major industries transitioning to new fields, and he thinks that mapping works best, but it all depends on the person. So
right.
I want to be turning it back over to Rita in just a minute. Have a couple of little technical things I'd like to mention. Somebody, I think it was actually Don Minio, asked me a couple of questions about this webinar and the future ones. If you registered for this one, you will automatically be receiving the reminder emails for the other ones. It was one registration for all four. So if you have some other people you'd like to tell about this, go ahead and forward the original email that you received. Don't forget the information about it is on the NING, and I think Rita's going to talk about the NING in just a minute or two. And finally, this webinar is being recorded again, and I will have that posted as soon as we can convert it into a Windows Media Player file. We'll get that posted up on the NING as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rita, and hopefully she can finish us up.
Okay.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, everyone. And both Kates, thank you. And Kate Brooks, that was fabulous. I agree. I agree that it was a wonderful reminder. Let me bring back up what's supposed to be on my screen here. Sorry. As you can tell, it's our first one. We will get smoother with this as we go along. Just a couple of important things. We've talked several now. Kate Alder has mentioned a couple times about the archived version and the NING. Many of you may not know what we're referring to about the NING, and I think the easiest way to share that with you is if you are on the call right now, we will send you an email along with the worksheets that you're going to get, a link to that that will have a direct link to NING. It's cacareercafe.ning.com, but instead of having to remember that, we will send that to you. That is our communication tool for all of our community college career professionals, and you'll find all the important stuff that we do will be posted there. So remember, we promised you the PDF of the worksheets that have the instructions included. We appreciate the fact that you've stayed on. We really would like your feedback. You know, Susan talked earlier about the fact that our ability to offer these webinars, we want to make sure that's working for you. So if you'll take just 2 to 3 minutes of your time right now to fill out a very short survey, it's going to pop up on your screen just as soon as you exit the webinar. If you'll do that for us, that would be a big help. And then we'll send you the worksheets beginning of next week, along with that link to NING, where the archive version will be posted. For those of you that are interested in wandering maps, this happens to be my favorite tool that Kate has taught us. That's what she's covering next week, along with vision boards. So we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for attending. We'll look forward to talking to you again very soon. Goodbye to everyone.